Hello, greetings, you groovy lovers of great music. How are you doing? Welcome to Full Record Jacket with Phil and Ben. And as you've probably gathered, it's another Benless show. Yep, he's still not back. But the good news is he is definitely getting better. So thank you for all of your good wishes and everything that you sent to him. We get well soon messages. He much appreciates it, and it has worked because I say he has felt considerably better. He's still not quite 100%, and he's still signed off work. So he thought maybe he shouldn't come on here and do something that goes up onto such a searchable channel such as YouTube. We don't want to get him into trouble, do we? So it's another monologue from me, and Ben has approved this monologue. He told me to go and make it actually. So if you fall asleep in the middle of me rambling on alone, then you know who to blame. So what am I going to talk about? Well, there's one particular birthday that occurred in the last week as I'm making this, and Michael Philip Jagger is now 80 years old. Yep, Mick Jagger, Michael Philip Jagger. You see, all the best people have a Phil in there somewhere, don't they? But yeah, what else can I say about Mick Jagger? One of the definitive frontmen in rock history. For me personally, probably if someone said to me Mick Jagger's the definitive frontman, I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not, because I mean the Stones for me, one of my favourite bands. I mean they may even be my favourite. It's difficult to know, but I certainly have spent many hours over the years listening to the Stones. I always enjoy them. I'm rarely not in the mood to enjoy the Stones. You know, you put the Stones on, I'm going to like it. So this is an interesting one to do because I thought I would look at Mick Jagger vocal performances and pick 80. No, don't worry, it's not 80. I'm going to do 8. Okay, I'm just going to pick one for each of his decades, and we're going to go across the decades, but mainly these are from mainly the 60s and the 70s. Now, the thing about the Stones is, I mean, you know, he's the front man, but really they're all stars, aren't they? Really, you know, Charlie on drums, God bless him. I mean, he was a standout drummer, really played an important part in their sound. Um, Bill Wyman's bass playing, of course, is highly regarded as well. Of course, you've got Keith Richards, and then all those other great guitarists who've been in the band: Brian Jones, Mick Taylor, and now Ronnie Wood. And you know they all play a part in all of the great records. So it's, you know, you can't just say it's Mick Jagger's vocal that makes the record. But listening to some of these tracks again, I'm thinking about the other ones. I haven't obviously listened to all of them. It's so difficult to think of a track where Mick Jagger doesn't do a good vocal performance. It's really hard to pick the standouts because he really does give it everything. He really does do a great job, even on the songs that are not so, not necessarily such great songs, the more averagey songs. He still does them really well. I thought for this list, I'm going to stay away from the big hits because we all know and love the Stones' big hits, and they've been talked about many times. So I'm going to go for what, in the popular parlance, are deep cuts and album tracks and ones that don't get talked about quite so often. And my criteria for these really is that they've got to be ones that do show off Mick Jagger's vocal prowess or bring across his personality, particularly. So we're going to start in 1965. We're going to start with a track from, well, depends which side of the Atlantic you're on. If you're in this country, Britain, we got it on Rolling Stones #2. If you're in the US and Canada, it was an LP called Rolling Stones Now. But either way, it's the same track. It's Down Home Girl, written by, I think co-written by Jerry Lieber, who was one half of Lieber and Stoller, who wrote all those 50s hits for the Coasters and Yakety Yak, Charlie Brown, and then a lot of Presley hits as well: Jailhouse Rock, King Creole, Hound Dog, all of that. So certainly a accomplished writer behind this one. And Down Home Girl, it's one of those groovy tracks. It's sort of that slow, cool. It's just really, really good. I mean, the whole band are great on this, but Mick Jagger sort of draws out the lyrics. And I just think a really good performance. There's also a performance of this. Stones performed it at their 1969 Hyde Park concert, that free gig that they did in the summer of '69, not long after Brian Jones had died, and it was a bit of a tribute to Brian Jones, the whole concert. And Mick Taylor made his live debut with the Stones. They do Down Home Girl on that set as well. So I'm going with Down Home Girl. That's my first choice. Second one, we're going to 1966 and an album that had a slightly different track listing on both sides of the Atlantic, but Aftermath, both versions had Going Home. And well, this is a song that's it must have been quite amazing for young people buying this album at the time, because it's a track that goes on for 11 minutes. I mean, that was just unknown in rock and roll and pop music in the 60s, wasn't it? 11 minutes and 11 seconds it is, I believe. Groovy track, bluesy. The Stones really do play well on this as well. And the second part of the song is just where they just carry on the vibe going. You know when you listen to a record and it's one of those records where the band plays great and it fades out, and you always wonder how long they carried on playing after that fade out. Well, in the case of the Stones, it's several minutes. It's just one that was just left going. They left the tape rolling. I'm not even sure it was intended to be this long. I think I read some story that this did happen fairly spontaneously. And Mick Jagger just ad-libs in bluesy style a load of vocals on this last part, where the band are playing really cool, really hot sort of bluesy. It's just quite mesmerizing. I fully recommend listening to this in mono. The stereo version is interesting in one regard. The band are right on one side of the stereo, and Mick Jagger's vocals are isolated on the other half. So if you do turn your balance control, you can isolate Mick Jagger's vocals and listen to just them. But that is a bit weird because there's quite a lot of silence in between. But in mono, it's really good. I think it's groovy. Going Home. So that's my second choice of these 8 Jagger vocals from the Stones. Third one, we're going to Beggar's Banquet from 1968. What an album that is. I mean, there's so many great vocals from him on there. Really difficult to pick one. Obviously, the standout vocal, I think it's fair to say, on that is probably Sympathy for the Devil, and probably is one of Mick Jagger's very greatest performances. But I'm counting Sympathy for the Devil as being a Rolling Stones greatest hit. So we're not having that. We're going to go for the track that changes the mood of the album right after that, and that's No Expectations. This really atmospheric, what is it? It's kind of country-ish, isn't it? It's kind of, I don't know, is it country blues? I don't know what you'd call it, but it's a really great atmospheric song. No Expectations. Mick Jagger's vocals are a very important part of that. I think he does it really, really well. So that is my third choice. For number 4, we're going to the next album in the discography. We're going to Let It Bleed, which is another one that's got so many great Jagger performances on it. Of course, there's another great vocal performance on this album from Merry Clayton, the soul singer who joins Jagger on Gimme Shelter. Really great track, but a Rolling Stones greatest hit. So I'm going to have to choose something else. And again, it's a difficult one, but I'm going to choose a song that starts off with a really atmospheric, I think it's Nicky Hopkins playing the piano, and then it turns into this rock song, and that is Monkey Man. And it's a great performance from Mick Jagger on there. He does a bit of ad-libbing. You get to hear him doing his monkey impression, and there's some of his weirdest lyrics on here as well. I know some of these lyrics in this song have been criticised as being weak, but I kind of like cold Italian pizza. I could use a lemon squeezer, and it's a great one, Monkey Man. We've got to have a rocker on this list, so that is my fourth one, and then we're out of the 60s. We're into the 70s, and 1971's Sticky Fingers, the album with the famous Andy Warhol jeans and the zipper on the front. What have we got from that album? Well, again, so many great vocals on there. Brown Sugar's a hit, so we're not going to have that. But I'm drawn to the ballads on this album for this, and I've picked two from this record. First of all, the one that a lot of people probably would go for as well. It's quite a popular one amongst fans. Moonlight Mile, which is a really great Stones ballad. It started off, if I'm remembering this correctly, it started off life as an instrumental that had been sort of experimented with, recorded, and titled Japanese Thing. And if you listen to the guitar intro, it is kind of Japanesey sounding. And I think this is one that Mick Taylor and Mick Jagger mainly put this song together. And I think I may be right in thinking that Keith Richards doesn't even appear on the recording. What does appear is a great string arrangement, which, if I remember rightly, is by Paul Buckmaster, who also did a lot of the early Elton John albums around this time. And really great vocal from Mick Jagger. I think he almost got, Mick Jagger doesn't normally do very personal, confessional type song lyrics. He doesn't put his own personal emotions right up front in his music, not often. But I think in this one, he was writing about the whole, the boredom and things of being on the road. And I think you are getting a bit of, almost autobiographical writing and singing here from Jagger. Really great as the song reaches its crescendo. It's just great vocal. I think it's him at his best. So that's Moonlight Mile. And then the other one from this album that I really wanted to include is a ballad, but different style, more of a soulful number, and that is I Got the Blues. And I think Jagger does this brilliantly. I think he's channeling Otis Redding and the soul side for this. It's a ballad with horns on it as well. It is the Stones doing their own soul song, I would say. Just really great. I Got the Blues. So we haven't got many left. Now I wanted to do. I might end up making 9 on this list. I said it was going to be 8, but I'm going to skip Exile on Main Street. Now, don't flame me, Stones fans. I'm skipping Exile on Main Street because I'm an Exile on Main Street geek, and it's one of my favourite albums of all time. I know there are some people who like the Stones who don't really quite get Exile on Main Street. Maybe we'll talk about that with Ben in another edition. But I really like the album. There's so many tracks on there. I could go on about it. So to stop me waffling and being boring, we are going to skip Exile on Main Street and go to the album that followed that up, which is a little bit overlooked sometimes, although it's got a little bit more love in recent years, and that is Goat's Head Soup. Now, there's so many great Jagger vocals on this as well. There's Angie, but that's a great ballad, but that was a hit, so that's not on my list. And another track that he sings really well, I think, is Heartbreaker, Do, 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 Heartbreaker, but I'm pretty sure that was a single, and I think that was a hit, may have been a hit in the US, so Heartbreaker's not on there. But I'm going to go with the opening track on this album, which, some people are not as keen on Dancing with Mr. D, but I've always liked it. I've always enjoyed it. And it is the Stones, and particularly Mick Jagger, being a little bit campy. We can't really take this song, well, I certainly don't take this song totally seriously. It's got a kind of, it's almost like it should be a Halloween song to me. It's all about being in the graveyard, and he's dancing with Mr. D, and then he's dancing with Mrs. D, and there's something about 44s, looking down at 44 in West Virginia and various other things. But it's Jagger at his campiest, and he just pulls this one off, I think. I don't think every performer could pull this song off, but Mick Jagger certainly does. So I'm going with Dancing with Mr. D. I'm picking tracks here where, his personality comes across as well. Going to go to the next album on the chronological list. It's Only Rock and Roll. Great vocal on the title track, but that was a greatest hit. It's on all the compilations of the Stones. So I'm going to go to the other end of this LP, and the closing track on it, which I still think is a great underrated Stones track. I don't hear many people talk about this. Fingerprint File, which is them doing a kind of funky experiment. This was 1974, and there were quite a lot of funky records around at that time. So they get a bit of that sound going. And again, this is maybe there's a touch of autobiography here, because Mick Jagger is basically in this song ranting about the fact that the FBI are keeping files on him. And that may have been true, actually, because I know the FBI, around this time when John Lennon had recently gone to New York, they were definitely trying to find a way to take his green card off him and get him out of the United States. And the FBI were keeping files on John Lennon. So I wouldn't be surprised they probably did it on Mick Jagger as well. Maybe he got wind of that. So maybe he wasn't being paranoid with this. But funky track. And near the end, there's this sort of section where you get Mick Jagger goes quite funky, and you get bits of his falsetto coming in, and then there's a good night at the end, which I can't really describe, but if you've heard the track, you'll know what I'm talking about. But great end to the album as well. So Fingerprint File, one of my favourite Stones deep cuts, so that had to be on the list. And then, have I done 8? I think I have done 8, but my little bonus, I thought I can't ignore the 80s and 90s and 21st century totally, because Mick Jagger has turned out great vocal performances, throughout his career, and he is 80, so I don't want to write off everything he's done since he was 50. So I'm going to go to 97 and the album Bridges to Babylon, which again, he sings well on this album. The one that's just standing out for me at the moment is Gunface, which is a kind of, I don't know how would you describe Gunface? It's kind of like a funky, strutting hard rock song. The only way I can describe it. It's a great performance by the whole band. Charlie Watts doing really great stuff on the drums, really drives it along. We got great guitars from Keith and Ronnie as well, but Mick Jagger does turn in an excellent vocal as well, as you would expect from him. It's a bit of I think it's a kind of a Wild West theme to this song, but it's really groovy. I like it. That's Gunface. So those are my personal 8, or was it 9, Mick Jagger vocal performances on Rolling Stones tracks. To be honest, I could have done 8 lists with 8 different lists of songs on each one, and they'd all have been great performances by Mick Jagger on all of them. So I'm sure your list will be completely different to mine, but let us know what it is. You might encourage me to go and listen to a Stones track I've not heard in ages, and I hope this video has encouraged you to go and listen to some Stones tracks that you haven't heard in ages, because that's what we like to do here on Full Record Jacket. Thanks for watching, and I will be back with another video very soon, and very, very soon with Ben as well, which I'm sure you will all approve of heartily. Thanks for watching for now. Bye.